Hello. As we enter the month of October, we'll explore the descent into horror. Welcome to the HolmFront. Hello, welcome to the weekend. I am your host, Tyler Holm. To my right, as always, is Mitch, my overly artistic friend. Mitch,
I'm here.
you are here. So I wanted to draw attention before we started. You're repping a shirt today.
I am.
Pretty sweet shirt.
This is an Opperman.
Well, you gotta let them see.
Okay, so I gotta.
You gotta move it out a little bit.
Here, up.
Just shift. There you go. Nice. Opperman. Obviously a derivative of something we probably can't mention on the show, so don't. But you want to explain what that is real quick?
Yeah. So Opperman is a. Since you ask, I may as well.
I'm asking.
It is a card game that I'm building. It's a cooperative card game where you play an action hero, and you go through fantastical scenarios and fight a bunch of monsters and aliens and things. And it's basically just kind of like how Super Smash Brothers is a amalgamation of all the Nintendo characters rolled into one.
Yep.
Opperman is like that, but with like cheesy 80s stuff. The good, the bad, and the real obscure. I just throw it all into one big mushing pot. It's a lot of fun. It's a really cool project. I've actually been hoping to get back to it in the near future. It's just laborious with all the other stuff going on.
All the other stuff. The stuff that I'm dragging you into, and then the stuff that you're dragging yourself through.
Yeah.
How far along do you think you would?
Creative torture, I call it.
Want to make a shirt saying that. What would you say your progress level is? Like 70%, kind of?
Well,
how far along are you?
So I spent like 2 years working on this game.
Right.
And made like, I'm not even kidding when I say like 5,000 cards. It was a lot of freaking cards. But then I reached a point where I realized that the fundamental mechanic I was using to play the game just took way, way too long. I mean, this is an action game. It's got to be snappy. I want someone to be able to sit down and play through a session in 25, 30 minutes,
Gotcha.
40 minutes, something like that, nice and contained. And it was just not doing that. So I had to gut the entire system and start all over, at least in terms of the actual core mechanic. But the good news is I've since figured out that core mechanic. And so now it's just a matter of setting aside time to sit there, focus on it, put aside other projects, and bring this thing to life.
Which will probably come after, that was a good segue, after the Oscarinas, which is another project that you're a part of. He hosts a award show for video games, currently in the years 92 and 93.
Yeah, we're doing 92, 93. Tyler's on it as well. We have some episodes where we talk about different retro games and, talk about their nominations or whatever. Everybody's got to make arguments for what makes the game artistic and why it should win. So rather than just being like a popularity contest, it's more like, yes, but what's the intellectual artistic merits of this
do it over wine
choice?
And hors d'oeuvres.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am part of that loosely, mostly as a co-host, and then I just kind of put my input whenever we actually do the awards show. I try and do like some set design and stuff, but
which actually that's going to be coming up soon because technically you're airing this episode in October, which means as of now you should be able to see the showcase videos for all of the nominees for 92 and 93, and then at some point in October or potentially November, depending on how it goes, because it's been hard to get everybody's schedules to coordinate. We're getting bigger. We have more members now, and so it's a little bit harder to get everybody to find time to sit down. So, but it's definitely happening. We're going to have, heck, while you're watching this, we could have already finished voting day for all I know. So.
Potentially. I'm not sure exactly what your timeline is, or I think this is first week of October that I'm going to be releasing this one.
First week?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so we should probably be organizing to sit down to talk about it soon then. It's weird to talk in YouTube time. This is something Tom and I always struggle with because we're always like, wait a minute. For everybody listening, it's a different time.
It is.
For us, it's the past or it's the present. But
we're talking to the future people. They know things that have gone on already. Yeah, and that'll be linked in the description below, which is weird to say. I always hear people say that, and now I'm saying it. It's weird.
You're saying it.
But I try and put as many of your links as I can in there, and mine as well, obviously, which...
appreciate that.
I think I have like a Twitter thing in there and
nice.
Instagram.
Okay.
And yeah,
I didn't even know that.
I'm not on them very much at all. I'm learning this whole thing.
The social media stuff is
not fun.
It's a job.
Torment would be the word I would choose for that. Not even creative torment, just torment. I much more enjoy the conversations here, and even this learning the technical aspect and stuff was all.
You did a fantastic job, though. It looks
thanks.
really nice.
Thanks. It needs some improvement for sure. And so we're worst critics. I'm obviously Tyler. Also, I help with the board game element that you do. I've helped a lot on Opera.
Yeah, you've contributed a ton with, especially creatively, with just all the different ideas.
It's a lot of fun. It's a good just creative exercise just in general. And then we're both aspiring authors. I feel like we should do a little bit more of this. People know who we are and what.
The preamble has been eluding us for a very long time.
I'm trying to make it as short as possible, and I'm already at like 6 minutes. It's just droning on about ourselves. This is the worst. I'm sorry, people.
I think part of the problem is we know each other really well.
Right.
So to sit
we just
down,
jump into conversation. And
we're just like it's time
what are
to
they
talk.
Talking about? Who are
time
they?
To talk movies and art and creative projects and things, and then everyone's like, who are these people?
Yeah, why do we care about what they have to say? You probably still shouldn't after we go through all this stuff. But I mean, I have a first draft of a novel written, which I'm going back through, and then obviously this, which is currently most of my time. But this is a long time coming brainchild of mine that I've just been trying to compile together. You were gracious enough to agree to be my co-host, so I appreciate that. But these are conversations that you and I have been having for
way too long,
since we were like 16.
Pretty much.
So I was like, we have these conversations anyway. Why don't we just start filming them, and hopefully people will enjoy listening. So hopefully I have an audience for this. But we're going to talk about today one of your favorite movies.
Yeah, so this is a me episode. I gotta say, mostly. We're talking about Opera Man, my award show, and we're talking about
this is his show now. This is
it's my show.
Change the name.
So you should have let me introduce it, and I could have said, "Welcome to the Kopitch Front."
There we go.
And
the Kopitch Front.
This is my slightly less artistic friend.
Slightly less, yeah. Don't have an MFA or any of that stuff. What movie is this?
So we're talking about The Descent, which is a 2006, I believe. 2006 horror film.
Yep.
It's not, quite as noteworthy as a lot of other horror movies, so you might not have heard about it. But the premise of the film is it's a group of women that are all adrenaline junkies, and they decide it would be fun to go spelunking in a cave. And then when they go down there, they discover that they are not alone. There are these creatures that have evolved that, essentially, whatever evolved into humans, it's like some of them got trapped in this cave and then evolved into these nightmarish, human monstrosities and start killing them, and they have to, fight their way out. So that sounds terrible, but I promise this is actually a really, really good movie. And as you can see, critics are in agreement with me. They give it an 87.
And so are the audiences.
Audiences like it too, not quite as much. I think they're lacking a little bit of its artistic merit.
Fair.
But it's a really great movie. Because it really utilizes the idea and capitalizes on it to the max, which is something I really appreciate about it. So, just to kind of the baseline reason why it's worth watching the movie is that they shot everything in real caves and they used real lighting within the cave. So, they light flares and they use flashlights to illuminate their surroundings. And so that gives a real tangible authenticity to what you're watching.
Right.
And so that really elevates the film. I think that's why critics rate it so highly, if I'm just going to come out the gate, because it's just doing that alone just gives so much, visceral.
It gives it some gravitas because it feels very immersive.
Yeah. Well, we were discussing some shots. We were looking through it and just being like, wow, there's definitely some visual effects shots here or there, and sometimes you can tell what they're doing, sometimes you can't quite tell.
Right.
Either way, it's really interesting to just see them kind of take a project like this and do something new and different, because I feel like that's the thing with horror is that there's
it's
always
too generic.
Yeah, it very quickly
tropey.
Just becomes super easy to do. It's super cheap. And since we're in the month of October and we're talking about horror movies, it's nice to illuminate one that illuminate. One that kind of stands out. Yeah.
Well, so and I want to make a comparison actually, because there was an episode of the Game of Thrones that did something similar, or they tried to, where there's a battle sequence that's filmed entirely in the dark. Right, because the filmmaker said something along the lines of, "We want it to be realistic. We want it to be as if you were actually there." Makes no sense, because why would you film a battle scene like that I can't see? This just feels totally unnecessary, and it really detracted from the gravitas of the scene, which didn't have much gravitas anyway. We can get into that some other day. But it's a really rough thing to watch, because you're just constantly like, is someone dying? What happened down there? But the thing about this movie is that it capitalizes on the emotions that evokes, because they're going, and the movie's called Descent because they're descending into these caves, this spelunking expedition, and obviously it harps on themes of claustrophobia and are we lost, and it's a lot of fear that you have whenever you go into an environment like this, and everything visually is used very effectively in order to play into that, which is the nice thing about it. I mean, for a horror film, like it's obviously not something I enjoyed as much as you did.
Well, this is a rare exception because you're usually more of the horror buff, and this is one that I actually
I was very
really
surprised
this
reached your top 10 or whatever it is that it's on.
Yeah, I think if I like crunch the numbers, it's sitting in that like number 10 or 11 slot. But yeah, it's right up there. I really do enjoy this movie.
Wait, where's number 2 at then?
I'd have to look at the list again. I need a whole episode on that. I'm sorry, you'll have to do another. You'll have to indulge me another time.
We'll do that. So you'll notice.
Yeah,
this is a Rotten Disparities episode, and this does not have that much of a disparity at all. It's 87-76. So one would wonder, considering our previous episodes, is this something that we would disagree on? And I will say no, it's not. The disparity comes in number 2, which bad movie. It's a bad movie. So I think what we'll do first is establish a couple rules of Rotten Disparities.
Okay.
So Rotten Disparities, obviously, and we've talked a little bit about this, but I feel like we'll expand it a little bit more. You tend to line up with the critics more often than not, and this is very loose averages. And then I tend to line up on audience's side more often than not. So if there's a disparity, if one likes the movie and one doesn't, you can reference one of us to kind of understand why. Prime example would be like The Last Jedi, obviously. Because you like that movie and I don't, and the scores reflect that.
That's a very mean insult. I would be very cautious about that kind of language on this show.
You're like, I quit. I'm done. No more.
There's so many other things you could have said about me that I would have rather have taken.
This has insulted your intelligence there. But no, I mean, you did your best on that episode to kind of try and understand why critics. And there was no viable explanation. But no, so this when you get into these scores, we try and keep it, I guess, like a 20% minimum disparity in order to like use it as an episode, I guess. But there's some that have a huge disparity. Some, like Last Jedi, I guess, had a 90% somewhere around there, and then like a 40% on the audience side, and that's a huge disparity. It's like, well, what was different here?
Yeah.
So when you get into these movies where it seemed like both of them enjoyed it, we use it as a jumping off point to get into the second one, which is really, really bad. And the disparity is this one is really well accepted. The second one, both of them reject.
Yeah.
And I find that interesting, and I'd like to explore why. So we just got done watching the second one. We just put ourselves through some torment, and that's one thing that these episodes have really lent to, is just going through some serious hardship on a creative level. Like, I do not want to watch that, but I'm gonna do it because I'd like to contribute to my show. So we did a bit of that today. So let's go into the first one.
Okay.
What is it you like about it?
Okay, so I like how it leverages the setting and tells the story like through the setting and with the setting. That's like number one, the main thing that appeals to me about it. The second thing I like about it is I like the ending. So this is going to be a spoiler conversation, I think, because there's really no way to talk about it without getting into the ending, especially because the second movie, as we'll get into, basically destroys every meaningful thing that the first movie does, which is part of the reason why it's so terrible. But one of the unique things about it is that, so you have the main character, Sarah, in this movie. Her husband and her child, who are like very young child, are like murdered brutally by some accident in the beginning of the movie. Kind of a classic horror tropey thing. The thing is as the movie progresses, she's kind of like going through this grieving process, and part of the reason why they're doing this spelunking trip is her friends are trying to get her to like kind of move on a little bit, 'cause it's been like a year or two, something like
Trying
that.
to crack her out of her shell.
Yeah, trying to get her back to doing the activities that they used to do, right? And so they go through, and then as they're battling these creatures, Sarah's the one who's like the most freaked out of everybody. But then this shift happens within her, and about midway through the movie, she like actually becomes one of the strongest people and is like fighting these things off. And when it gets to the end, I guess I could do it slightly without spoilers, but when it gets to the end, she has something of a chance to get out and doesn't really take it. And instead, she settles in there and is kind of like trapped in her own delusion. And almost like you get this fantasy image where she thinks she's with her daughter again.
Right.
Like it's over like her birthday cake. And then it like pans back. And, like it's perfect because you see her and then it pans across and then there's like nothing. There's just the cave. And then it pans over and you see her daughter and then pans back. Then it pulls out, and then you realize her daughter's not there at all, and it's just in her imagination. And so she's trapped in this cave all by herself. So it's a descent into madness. And I freaking loved Descent into Madness. That's like one of my. That's like you do Descent into Madness. I'm interested.
If you do it well, yes.
Yeah. Well, because it's fascinating. It's fascinating how like it's like the character's own like drives and grief is more important than their own survivability, which isn't super realistic, but it does make for a fascinating story to follow.
Right. And this is one of those that, again, all of its themes play into it. So the camera shots, the way that it's lit, and being in an actual cave, her grief, the trauma, like the way she deals with situations, it all plays into that central theme to where it comes to that crescendo really nicely, and it leaves the ending up to interpretation. Like it gives you a couple of psych outs. You think that something happens, and then it doesn't, and then you see her daughter and how she's kind of trapped in her own mind, and then you kind of wonder what she does with that information because the movie ends. And obviously it plays into other themes where, without getting to too much spoilers, which I don't think we care necessarily, but
I don't know, it's your show.
It is my show. Well, I guess so. That'll be the spoiler-free section. We can jump into a little bit extra here because we'll give it some more detail, I suppose. So there's a character in there named Juno,
who's her best friend.
Who is her best friend, and she's the adventurous one, the one that knows spelunking and brings. She's
sets
the one
up
that
this whole thing. Encourages her to go. Yeah,
and she's the one that chooses the location, brings all the friends.
Yeah.
And then she's actually got a really interesting arc as well. She goes through some really, because she's supposed to be like this antagonist, but at the same time, she's a relatable character that's in the show. She feels really real.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the movie, they're doing this group activity. I can't remember what exactly it was, but Juno's there, and the husband and the daughter, and there's this
the water rafting?
Yeah, the water rafting, that's what it was. And there's this weird moment in there where you kind of get an implication that something's going on between the husband and Juno.
Yeah.
And it's not quite picked up on fully, and then he dies before you're able to expound it on any further.
Yeah.
And then Sarah finds out later on the extent of it from Juno.
Yeah.
And then takes action. And that's like that's Sarah's resolution to the grief. She finally is able to face it with something tangible and personal. Because in the cave, she's just fighting these monsters or whatever. But with Juno, it's an embodiment of the grief that she's gone through for this whole time.
Yeah.
And then it's expounded upon even further by the fact that Juno kills off one of the other characters that Sarah is very warm towards.
Yeah.
And it's an accident, but at the same time, she doesn't conduct herself entirely honorably.
And it then becomes a condemnation against her later.
Right.
Which I also think is really interesting because it plays into like how when people are in tense situations or are not in a very forgiving mood, how they'll kind of turn on each other, even if they're your friend. So
how they'll use even those mistakes against you.
Yes.
Because they're using it to understand your character. When you already have a bad character, you've already done things.
Right.
That just kind of exasperates it. Because Juno never quite admits that she was cheating on Sarah, or cheating with Sarah's husband, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And then she never quite admits what actually happens to Beth.
Right.
But
she doesn't really take responsibility for these things.
right.
But also, like, they're in a cave trying to fight for their lives. So
Right.
she's like, well, it's not really a good time.
But the
for
point
this.
was that she
Yeah.
doesn't admit before they go to the cave either.
That's true too.
So
yeah.
she kind of just has all these secrets, and they're all hurting Sarah, even though she never like offers an opportunity for
like,
Sarah to
actually
heal,
mend
to
that,
give
yeah.
her some kind of closure, even though it would be a painful thing to hear. She
Yeah.
won't step up and take responsibility. She just kind of was like, well, if I just help her out of her grief in this way, maybe it'll make up for it.
Right.
So then Beth kind of exasperates that. And Beth is a character that comes up on Juno after she's gone through this fight. Juno spins around thinking that it's something else trying to attack her and kills Beth, or thinks that she does. Beth doesn't die right away and is able to later tell Sarah about what happened.
Yeah.
And Sarah takes that as like...
Yeah, she gives her like a mortal wound, but she's going to die like super slowly.
Right.
But it's like seriously, she gets attacked. Like they're getting attacked by these creatures when they first encounter them. And then they get like one of them gets like straight up killed. And then the creature is like trying to pull the body away, and then Juno is the only one who has the freaking courage to like get up in its face and is like, this is like taking one of our people.
Right.
Like, F this. Like, I'm putting a stop to it. So she gets a pickaxe and is like trying to beat the thing away from it, but she's also like freaked the crap out. And then another one jumps her, and then the other girl gets taken away. But so then she has to fight this one, and then in this like rage, she just beats it to death and is like, whoa, crap. So it's like her fight or flight instincts just like skyrocket in this moment, right? And then it's like she hears someone else come up behind her, and she just like whips around and like stabs him. But then that's, of course, Beth. And then she's like in shock. And so the thing is what's so powerful about that moment is that Beth is like, oh, don't leave me here because those creatures are going to get me. And then Juno does. But I like that reaction because it's like, oh, like you want Juno to like put her out of her misery, but also like, think about what you're asking. Like, she's not a murderer. She just killed this thing. She's not like...
And she was the only one trying to save the other friend.
Yeah. And I think
yeah.
that's important too, because like she's doing something that no one else is like capable of doing. Like they can't bring themselves to like cross over this threshold into this new territory.
Right.
Of
everyone else is scattered and is hiding, and she's the only
Right.
one in this situation. So her fight or flight kicks into fight, and so she's trying to. But then because of that, she's just kind of locked in this survival mode, and then Beth disturbs that.
And it actually is indicative of other things she's done, where it's like she makes a mistake and then she like closets up and is like, oh, like I'll just carry this. They don't have to know, right? And so I like that dynamic a lot. I think that's really interesting. And that's like, there's a true terror that you can create from that, because now you've got this Beth character who's dying slowly, and you're like, are these things gonna find her? And like, when is she gonna be alive by that point? I hope not. So you're really like, it's pulling on your emotional investment just by having a situation that's a bit more tangibly real. And so it has a lot of those moments that I think really elevate it.
It's very human in what it explores, and it just uses these elements of the cave and the monsters and then their interactions with each other as characters in order to get you emotionally invested. And it doesn't really harp on them too much. They're just elements of storytelling rather than the thing that takes over the whole movie.
That was something I was going to bring up too, actually, if I could jump in
real
quick. Because the whole emphasis, like one critique I could see people throwing at this movie is that like, okay, like they're upset about like an affair in this cave. Like really, like, come on, that's the most dramatic thing when you've got this horrific survival situation going on. But I feel like it works because, like you're saying, it's a matter of storytelling. Like it still narratively fits, and also they don't play it up so much that it's exacerbated. It's more just kind of comes up, and you're like, oh man, these are like some deep-seated problems with the inner workings of their relationships outside of this context that are now resurfacing.
But it's intentionally harping on grief. And so when the husband and the daughter die, they're gone. There's no closure that you can get from that. That's just grief. Now you just got to sit there and just deal with this grief of losing these two loved members. But at the same time, what Sarah has to deal with is the fact that her husband was being unfaithful to her before this happened, and there's no closure from him.
Yeah.
So the only person she can get it from is Juno, and Juno's not giving it to her. And so in the cave, when you're delving into those emotions,
Sarah doesn't know. So part of Juno, I bet you, is thinking like, do I even bring it up? He's gone. What does it matter now?
Right. But at the same
time, there's a
time,
logical way to take that.
Sure, that's fair. And I think just to harp on that point, though, is that when you're in that cave and you're dealing with all these emotions, the strongest ones are going to come to the surface in order to help help you face the situation at hand.
Sure.
You're just feeding into your fight or flight survival mode. And so when you are able to focus all that energy into something tangible, in this case it would have been Juno and Sarah dealing with her grief, in something that, directly it contributed to it.
Yeah.
Because she did. And when she finds out, she's like, so all this could have been, it could have been handled. I could have been feeling better. I could have had some kind of closure if you had just given this to me. And now we're here facing this situation, and I'm dealing with this newfound information.
Yeah.
And you're my best friend. And so, like, all that just kind of channels into this reaction.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I said, it's storytelling elements in the film that are very effectively used, but also they're not so overused that it just kind of delves into horror tropes. They're just there as elements, kind of like Walking Dead, or the zombies are just part of the world rather than something that, if you jump into like Night of the Living Dead or something, where that's the factor that they're dealing with. So, yeah, I mean, it's intelligently told. It's a very well told story for what it is.
Flip the screen. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're jumping into 2?
Well, no, I've put
you're right. You're right.
Two of us. Yeah, the other thing I think is worth mentioning is it sticks very nicely to the hero's journey, which is always a good sign for me too. That's like another big bonus point. There's a specific scene that they capture, which doesn't always happen in your typical hero's journey, but it does in this one. And it's the rebirth sequence. So there's a scene where Sarah gets separated from everybody else, and she falls into this pit of blood. And so she like gets submerged in it and like climbs out, and then she lays on this rock, and this monster comes up. And then and then she like kills that monster, right? She's kind of like, this is like the moment when she's like shifting from being scared to like actually taking control.
Yeah.
So what's super fascinating is like Juno's is this like frantic transformation of just like extreme stress, and then she's just like kills this thing, and then she kills someone else, and she has this like really horrific thing that kind of is associated with it.
Yeah.
It's like a more violent kind of aggressive approach, whereas like Sarah's is more like she's kind of traumatized, but then it's just kind of like her and the elements, and she just focuses on that, and then she pushes through the elements, and she's like a stronger person for it.
So it's almost like Juno becomes something involuntarily, whereas Sarah realizes what she has to become in order to survive.
Right. And it just by having, a careful attention to these symbols, I mean, it's like, yeah, maybe you're making it a little more dramatic. How would there be a pool of blood in this cave?
Sure.
But then also, like, it's kind of creepy. It's kind of dark. It's a cool, like, twisted transformation. And I love character transformations, right? And I like seeing these two characters get split up, kind of evolve, and then when they reconvene, now they have a ton of conflict, and it's almost like they don't know each other anymore. Because they both gone through this
now.
Yeah, they both gone through the same transition, but it looked differently and it meant differently for each of them. And so I think that's just a really cool way to structure out the story. So yeah, I mean, I really like the film. I think it's a great film. I think critics were totally right. Audiences were right, and the only person who was wrong was everybody who made the second movie.
Right. So let's jump into that, shall we? So here we are with Descent number 2.
Okay, I actually disagree with the critics. This should be like a 2%.
It's pretty generous for both of these scores, really. Okay, so I'm gonna jump in here because I just watched this.
Okay, yeah. Actually, let's get your fresh take, because I had seen this movie before. I watched them back to back. I finished the first one. I was like, wow,
I can't believe that you
good.
tried. Why would you assume that this could make a decent sequel?
I don't know. I just put it on.
Some faith right
It was
there.
a weird night where I just wanted to know what those movies were because I'd always been curious about them. But yeah, so you just watched it. You had seen the first one and then rightfully stopped. You made the wise, discerned decision. And then I made you go back on that by making you watch this.
I mean, hey, thank you for contributing to the show. I wonder how much more of this I can take. Yeah, so I watched the first one. It didn't have as much of an impact, but I did appreciate that it was much more intelligent than I thought it was going to be. So it surprised me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, this actually has some merit. I appreciate that. And it's kind of one of those that you see once and you're like, all right, I got a good movie. That was perfect. I probably won't watch it again, but for what it's worth, I liked it.
Yeah.
But I noticed, especially at the end there, because it kind of deals with the it deals with the descent into madness, and it actually ends really well to embody that. I was like, well, what are you going to do to make a second one? Like, that is the way that you end this movie.
Right, it's a perfect ending.
It's a classic Lovecraft ending. It's one of those where you're like, I'm not sure what reality is. I don't even know if she actually made it as far as she did.
Right.
It doesn't look like she's going to come out voluntarily. It looks like she's She's become the monster, essentially.
Yeah, she's become a
but
kind
this, like,
of monster.
refined, exactly.
Yeah. And we just don't know what that looks like, and it reveals to us, like, okay, this is terrifying, because I don't know her anymore. Like, I thought she wanted to survive and get out of here.
Yeah.
Now it just seems like she's gone.
Because in the beginning, she's this timid, non-confrontational person, and at the end, she's killed all these things and basically left her friend to die.
Yeah.
And that does things to you, and it visually showed that very well. So when I was going into this, I was like, I know that this is not going to be good, but how not good is it going to be? I will say it is one of the most predictable films I've ever seen, to the details. Like, I watched about half of it, and then you showed up, and I just had it on to finish it. And I was intentionally, like, I was pointing out what was going to happen before it happened. I was like, he's going to get his hand cut off.
Basically ad nauseum.
Yeah.
It became a
like,
drinking game of who could predict it first.
Yeah, that would have been fun. We should do that.
If we had done a drinking game, we would not be recording this because we would be both blackout drunk by now.
We'd be wasted. But yeah, I knew exactly what was going to happen, when it was going to happen. I knew, so there's a scene. So to begin with, Sarah...
Yeah, just do the beginning. Just the opening scene.
Sarah pops out with this really contrived... This tow truck driver or whatever stops because of this deer in a road. So as he's driving, this deer pops out and he stops,
which is already contrived because
it's dumb. Why did you need this? Yeah, why is this deer? And then Sarah comes out of nowhere, so he just happens to stop in the spot where Sarah is gonna pop out of the forest, and then she hits the window and like does this like slow slide down the. I was like, what is this? Is a comedy? Yeah, it should have had the noise like. So that happens, and I'm like, oh no, we went this bad. Okay. So she goes to the hospital.
Yes.
Somehow. And here's the thing, they ruin that in the end too, as to why she even made it to the hospital in the first place. Like that, they at the very end they totally
undo
why you shouldn't have gone to the hospital.
Right.
So she goes to the hospital. These two cops show up. Here's the problem with this. So there's two movies we've discussed already. Right? Yeah. Two movies we discussed already. One was Alien.
Okay.
Alien sets up your presuppositions intentionally to make you wonder who the heck's going to make it.
Yes.
And it does it expertly.
Right.
And then Descent 1 does it expertly as well. Like, you kind of know it's going to be Sarah, but you don't know what that means.
Yeah. Well, but also, too, the great thing is that Sarah doesn't make it out, nor does she die. She just becomes something other than herself.
Right.
And that's what
she descends into madness.
Right. And that's what makes it a really rewarding film, is you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming.
Because it is something you don't expect. Yeah, you
think
think that she's going to make it, and they even psych you out that she does make it, and then
they pull you back in, and you're like, oh, I don't want to be down here with you in this creepy space. Ugh.
Exactly. So it makes it memorable.
Yeah.
This one, two cops show up at the hospital. One is an older guy. One's a younger female. And I was like, there she is. She's going to make it out with Sarah at the very end, and he's going to die a horrible death. I'm not supposed to know that the minute that I see a character walk on screen, but I knew that was going to happen.
Right, because she's the rookie, she's the up-and-coming feisty one,
and
he's the old guy who's that too. Yeah, he's been around the block, but that's going to be too much. He's going to have.
Right.
Dumb.
And he's set in his ways, and this old dog to learn new tricks. And not allowing any nuance. He just thinks Sarah's guilty. I'm going to get her.
That was a good point you brought up as we went through the beginning again. You're like, they're not establishing any of the characters, and they totally don't. It's just like a character starts talking about something going on, and you're like,
why do I care?
Who are you?
Because it jumps like a bunch of times. And that was something you brought up as we're watching. We're like, who are we supposed to be following in this movie?
Yeah, I was like, who's the main character? Because Sarah doesn't show. I mean, apart from her being like, on the windshield, we don't know how much of a role she's going to play outside of that. So you're just
then she doesn't talk for like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
For like half the movie, she doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
At one point, she runs off, but like...
because she has memory loss, it's worth saying. So she forgot everything that happened in the first movie.
Which is one of the other contrivances of the film, is that she comes out, the doctor's all like, she's forgotten everything, we sedated her. And then they go in and question her. I was like, didn't you just say that she's sedated?
Yeah,
How are
and
they
then they're like,
talking?
and then they wake her up, and she's just like, "Where am I? What's going on? Where's my daughter?" And they're like, "Sweetie, your daughter's dead." I'm like,
Which is how the
"What?"
first movie starts. It's like, that was way, way long ago that this daughter died. Why are we asking what happened to her daughter?
Yeah,
It's just odd. This temporary amnesia thing has just not been done well very often, and this
yeah,
one was a pretty egregious case of it.
yeah.
But
So hold on a second.
yeah,
Let's just catalog. It undoes the fact that she was trapped in the cave because
right, because
now
she
she
makes
actually
it
did
out.
get out.
Right,
And then it also undoes the meaning of everything that happened in the
right,
first movie
'cause
for
the
her
end
character
of
because
the
she forgot it all.
the
It's
end
all
of the first
gone.
movie is a conscious decision. That's the whole point.
Right. She makes the decision.
Yep.
Yeah. And so it's like,
And then this one, it's like, oh, so she forgot everything that she just decided to do. So I don't know exactly the timeline because it's kind of unclear, but they're saying they've been searching for the other cave divers for like 2 days.
yeah.
So I don't know if Sarah comes out 2 days later, or if it's like beforehand and he just takes a while to take her to the
Yeah, it's not super
hospital.
clear.
It's not super clear,
Yeah.
but she's in the hospital. She's all cut up. She's got other people's blood on her shirt, and that's causing this officer to have a lot of suspicion about her. Like, did you bring him down and kill all your friends? Which is just odd. Like, he has no basis for this. He's just like, I think she did it.
Yeah. Like,
Because
what?
she has blood on her shirt. It's like, okay, they weren't like attacked by a bear and she got away. It's like, no, it's her. So the whole thing is really strange.
But then rather than arrest her because he's suspicious,
He drags her back down to the caves.
he drags her back into the cave.
They find a body. This dog finds a body in this old mine or something, near where she came out or whatever. And they're like, well, we don't know this cave system. It's uncharted, but she's been down there. So we're going to bring her back down and just drag her through all this trauma that she probably went through, just so she can lead us to our friends, which are clearly dead. It's been 2 days. All of their blood is on her shirt. They're probably dead. But we're going to go down there anyway.
If you really want to, you could send a party down there. I mean, you should probably be mapping this cave out anyways. Why do you need to bring her along? How's that going to helpful?
It made
I can
no
see
sense,
sitting
yeah.
down and asking her some questions, provided she's okay with it, because it's like, hey, your friends might be down there. Can you help us? What can you tell us? What did you find? What happened?
Yeah.
Conveniently, she forgot all her members. I think the only reason why she forgot her members is because she remembers them all back throughout the course of the movie. So it's like, this is pointless. The only reason she forgets is so that way
She doesn't
can't
resist.
tip them off about the monsters.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and can't resist going down there.
That's fair.
Because she would be like, there's these freakish monsters down there. But I mean, you could have her say that, and then they could be like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We're
going down anyway. Which, I mean, Stranger Things does that, right? Where Will is like the secret agent or whatever, and he says there's an area where the monster's going to come out, but he leads him into a trap because he's being controlled by the creature or whatever.
Oh, is
And
that the fourth film or the fourth season?
No,
or
it's the
something?
second season.
Second season? Oh, I don't remember him doing that. But,
Yeah, because
okay.
remember after the thing that goes into his mouth, and then
Oh,
they like
yeah.
open the gate or whatever,
That's
and the
right.
dogs come out and they attack, and that's when.
Spoilers for season 2 of Stranger Things.
Anyway, yeah, sorry. Stranger Things, great show. But yeah, so with this film, not only does she end up going back down with them, but the two cops go as well, who have no experience spelunking. The cop brings a gun, which don't shoot a gun in a confined cave. I don't know who needs to, but they even acknowledge that in the film.
Yeah.
And they still do it. It's like,
he's like, well, I'm not being parted from my pistol.
yeah, I'm not leaving this behind. So anyway, so they go down there.
Also, he's in no shape to go spelunking.
No, neither
I'm
one
sorry.
of the cops looked like they were
Neither
ready to
one.
do it. Yeah.
Spelunking, that's a lot of work.
It's
you don't just
very
go
physical.
spelunking for the heck of it. Like, the whole reason why it worked in the first movie is they established that, hey, these are thrill seekers. These are adrenaline junkies.
Right.
Adrenaline junkies, they do crazy stuff like this.
Right.
And there's like this whole thing where
Juno's done it.
yeah,
and the other,
she's already done it, yeah.
and she thinks she's good enough to be able to lead these through this cave, and it's to get Sarah out of her grief mode. So like, they're just a group of idiot women that just are like, well, let's just do it. Why not? And they're not like professionals. They don't have any people they don't have anyone regulating them. It's just we got a bunch of gear. Let's just go. Yeah. Whereas this one,
they're doing a YOLO moment.
Exactly.
But like people who are adrenaline junkies, this is not a typical behavior of theirs to be like, it's more exciting if like, we're just hanging loose. It's like, whoo.
Spelunking is a difficult and very scary thing to do. I've done a little bit of it, not a whole lot, but I mean, there's a section out near us where it's very much like that. It's very confined. You probably have about yay much space that you can crawl around in.
Oof.
And it gets rough. Like you gotta push your mind through it. And that one wasn't even a serious one. Like it's very accessible and you can get out pretty easily and stuff. This one obviously is way more extreme than I would ever do.
Yeah.
But you gotta keep your mind moving. You gotta keep moving. Gotta feel like you're making progress and ignore the claustrophobia and such. You can't, and not anyone can just go do it. Even I had trouble with something easy. Like that's
you got to be able to
a lot of mental fortitude.
Yeah, because it's like it's the physical demands.
Right.
Because it's gonna be a rough day. It's a lot of exercise. But then the mental space makes a lot of sense
All that to say,
too.
these two cops not at all prepared for this, and there's no reason for them to have gone in the first place, but they go, and it's just to create all these scenes of. And the thing is, they try and set up this dichotomy with the female cop and Sarah. Because Sarah has a dead daughter, this cop has a daughter that she needs to live for or whatever. And you kind of, like, the minute that they set up, you're like, oh, okay, now I know how the movie ends.
But she's like you pointed out to me, she, like, rubs it in.
Yeah, so
it's weird.
Sarah doesn't remember her daughter's dead, so this female cop's the one that breaks the news to her for the second time.
Yeah.
And then they drive her to this cave site where all of her friends are likely dead. And it's been so traumatic that Sarah's forgotten about it. And then the cop decides to take a call from her daughter and be like, No, I'll be home later, honey. I love you. I'm glad that you're alive and not dead like this chick's daughter. Like, it's just like, why are you having this phone call in front of this lady? What is wrong with you?
It's like we're supposed to like this character?
Right, yeah. Get out of the car and walk away and have this conversation. It was so irreverent and just kind of like, ugh.
It's like, love you, sweetie.
Right.
All right, let's go take a look at your dead friends. Could you point them out for me?
Like, let's go find their bodies real quick. But then
I know. Sorry about your dead daughter, by the way. Anyways, let's take a look at your dead friends.
Everyone around you dies. What's wrong with you? But then she does it again later. She thinks
she does it again.
But at least that one is more believable in my eyes because they're in the cave. She thinks she's not going to make it out. So she pulls out her phone and like films this goodbye message. Like, I love you. Be a good person. Like, it's really stupid lines, but... But then she films it and says goodbye to her daughter and then puts it back in the bag. But they're in a spot where they can't, like, separate so she can run off and film it where Sarah's not going to hear it.
Right, which is fair enough.
And it's the one that sets up Sarah was like, you're getting out of here, man. You're going to say it to her face. And it's like, okay, cliche line. Thank you for that.
Which is not something Sarah would have said or done. Nothing Sarah or Juno, because Juno's still alive, by the way. Even though it's very clear that she's a goner in the first movie.
Right.
But
she's dead.
Anyways, you get into this one. Juno and Sarah they're like different characters. It's just like it's Rachel
like
and Jessica now in this one. It's just they're not the same.
Well, they swap from what they become in the last movie. It's now like they switch places. Like Juno is Sarah and Sarah is Juno from the end of the previous film. And that's the problem with it is that it undoes what the previous film does.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense. They should have had Juno get out and start this movie. Just like have her crawl out with her busted leg and everything. She could actually get that healed up, and then they go back in to get Sarah, and then
that'd be interesting.
That at least could potentially work.
Let's save that because I was going to ask you how you fix the film at the end.
Okay, yeah.
So with this. Yeah, it intentionally undoes everything the first movie does. All the emotional impact, all the intelligence of the writing that it had, it just removes it. And then makes it intentionally very dumb on so many levels. Like, so many people make so many decisions that are super tropey with, like, a B horror film.
Yeah.
And so...
Like, of course, he brought the gun into the cave, so he shoots the gun in the cave.
Right.
That was a dumb move.
Let's check off gun. You know, if you bring it in, you're going to have to do something with it. And we all know what's going to happen when you're shooting in a cave and it's going to cause a rock slide.
But he does nothing. He doesn't even shoot a monster with it. I'm like, come on, man.
Yeah, he falls over and fires, and then it creates this landslide. And so, with that, you know, okay, obviously he's going to die because he's a moron.
Right.
But yeah, everything's predictable about it. And then everybody makes dumb decisions, just in general. Even Sarah, it's really dumb decisions.
Which is frustrating to watch because it's a character who like
made all the smart decisions.
Had changed, I made all the smart decisions. Now,
and then, like you said, Juno's alive, even though clearly at the end of the first film, it's like she's doomed. Yeah. There's no way you made it out of that,
right?
But somehow she's made it out of that and become this like, I am the dark.
Oh yeah, because that's the thing. He encounters the sheriff does. He finds her. And in the scene where he finds her, he's about to get killed by the monsters.
Yep.
And then Juno shows up and just like butchers these things. She kills like 4 of them.
Yep.
And she's got a busted leg and everything. And then she's like, like gonna like kill him too. And he's like, like freaking out. And you're like, it's like she hasn't talked to a human in like 15 years. It's been 2 days.
Yeah,
like,
she's only
she
done there
just
for
be
2
like,
days.
a human being? How did you get in here? Let's get out of here. I've been
Help me.
surviving for so long, I thought I was going to die. Oh, my goodness. But no, it's like she's been here for 15 years, and it's just like primal.
Yeah,
she's lost her mind.
It makes no sense. And then she's like dragging him around with the flashlight, which her eyes would not be adjusted to. I mean, it would have been like blinding. So they'd have to sit. Anyway, not to like go too far into the minutia of the film, but yeah, it deflates all that, and it takes away all the filmmaking techniques that made the first one interesting.
Yeah.
Everything is it's like daylight bright in there.
It's so freaking bright.
And that's one of the things about, even where I was, it is pitch dark. There's no light that makes it in those places.
Right.
That's the point. That's why they like these places, these weirdo explorers. There's like, I get to go into this unexplored dark space, and I get to be the one that sees all this stuff. And it's like, well, I don't know what's wrong with you, but this one, it's so brightly lit. It looks so fake. It looks like it's all on a set. The first one looks like you're actually in a cave. It looks,
because you are.
It's dark. It's a real cave that they're obviously filming.
Right, and then they're using flares and glow lights and flashlights to illuminate everything. That's the lighting for the scene, which makes it great because it's visually dynamic and it feels like you're actually there with the characters, and it creates like a good mood. And this one, all that goes out the window, and you sometimes have like multiple light sources. Like there were certain shots I was like, look at how like the light source from the room she's in versus the light source that's like hitting the side of her face from the other room, which is like flickering in a totally different color. That's like there's some campfire in the other room. It's like, what campfire? Where is that coming from? What is
it's like flickering or whatever.
It just looks like
there's no reason for the light to exist at all in any of these scenes.
And like
and then they intentionally make you like they're trying to make you believe that it's dark in there. Like the one guy, he has the night mode on the camera and he's like looking into it when it's like way brighter in the room. It's like, why would you look through this limited view when you could just look around? It made no sense.
Just use your eyes.
It was like they were trying to have their cake and eat it too. It's like, no, it's dark in there. Like they're in a cave. Obviously it's dark. Well, then make it dark.
Make it dark.
I'm not gonna just believe it if my eyes are telling me something different. I can see that they can see in there.
That thing.
What happened? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting to just switch over to our view, but whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, that all happens. The ending is especially bad.
It does look like sets, by the way. It does not look like a cave at all because it's like flat ground, like flat terrain that they're walking on so often. And there's like, oh, this boulder, I gotta move around this boulder. And like maybe potentially this could have worked if this was the first movie, but like you as the filmmakers saw the first movie, I would assume. So
you would hope that would be the one
thing
thing they did is like, let's maybe watch the first one before we do the second one.
Yeah,
that's all we need. That's the only source material we need to riff off of.
Right, exactly. So
they missed all the themes when they watched.
Even the exterior shots, like when the movie starts.
Yeah.
The first film has it's like it almost kind of looks like The Ring, where it has like a heavy like greens and blues.
Right.
Very kind of like
it looks like they're shooting in like
lighting.
Early winter or something.
Yeah,
and that's what they're going for, gloomy and depressing and dark.
Which matches the character because she's going through grief. But then you get into the second film, and it's just like spanking daylight, no light source, like no emphasis or filters required. Just like turn it. It's like if I brought a camcorder and just like hit play. Okay, go guys. Just like on a random Saturday in the summer. It's like I'm not buying it. It just is like totally. Yeah, wrong mood.
It detracts from the mood. It doesn't play into the theme properly. But it doesn't really. The second one, to be fair, doesn't really have a theme. It just kind of does what it thinks it needs to do in order to be a second film. Anyway, I mean, not to harp too much further on that, but I mean, that was the disparity was between the two. But I would like to ask, if you were to have done a second movie, how would you have done the second movie? Because you've always told me. The first one you like so much because it feels like a movie that you would have written. Like it feels like a story you would how you would have written that story.
Yeah. I would. I don't think I would have really changed much about the first one.
Sure.
Maybe there's like a nuanced thing here or there, but for the most part, I like how it plays out, and it felt like a good challenge. Like sometimes I get a story like the decisions of where they took the characters was not what I was thinking they were gonna do.
Right.
And when I saw what they were doing, I was like, that's interesting. I didn't think of that, but that actually works perfectly for this. So that's why I admire so much. So for one, you shouldn't make a second movie because the first one's perfect.
I
It's
thought
like
that was the
totally
point.
self-contained.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it clearly doesn't need a second one. But okay, we're here, so we have to do it. So yes, as a preloaded, I alluded to earlier, I would have Sarah stay trapped. I would have Juno get out. I know that it looked like she wasn't going to make it, but whatever. She gets out. I need her. I
There's
need
a
this
whole
other
Boba
character.
Fett thing where it's like
Yeah,
it survives the Sarlacc.
But yeah, I need Juno here. I'm not gonna be able to make it without her and Sarah, because otherwise, the only other route is to do totally new cast and then what
Then
I
they
would do.
find them down there or something. They find the
No,
bodies.
no relationship.
Oh,
I would
okay, gotcha.
totally not do anything with that. All I would do is make it a group of men. That's the only thing I would do. I would make it all men, adrenaline junkies, and they go down, and then we would explore like masculine interpersonal relationships, just like how the first one did.
So exploring a gender dynamic on the opposite side of the spectrum.
That's
okay, gotcha.
yeah. That's one route you could do. It is a descent, but it's like a different kind.
Okay.
And yeah, and then you could compare them from like a gender perspective. Might be interesting.
Yeah, because it does have a lot of very strong gender themes in the first film.
Yeah,
and they play them well. It's not super over the top, which is one of the things I was afraid of. It was like, I wonder what this is going to be, because I was surprised. To be fair, I was surprised. I was like, oh, okay, they actually did this a lot less dramatically and irritatingly.
Well, it was good that it worked because I think it was a good idea to commit to just all women in the cast for the first descent, because what it meant is they were forced to make each of those characters unique and dynamic and different from each other.
Right.
And so it avoids that problem where you have this situation where it's like, oh, we can't make her look bad in front of the men, so then you have her do things that just don't feel reasonable, realistic, or in keeping with her character at all in the movie. And that's the part that you're worried about. But if they're all women, then it's like someone in that group is going to stand up and be like, we have to be strong, ladies.
Sure.
And that person, of course, was Juno. And then, of course, Sarah follows in suit on her own path. And so, but that was cool because you got to see those dynamics evolve naturally because they had set it up that way.
Well, it's almost interesting playing back into the theme of the film where when Juno kind of takes the lead, it's almost like she reaches down and pulls Sarah up behind her, but then Sarah jumps ahead of her and becomes that. So it's almost like playing into that friendship theme that they have, because like, you're my best friend and you're the one that helped me survive, but also you're the one that left me to die emotionally.
Right.
And then, tried to hide it. So now I'm going to leave you behind.
Yeah. So Juno's like, are you out of your mind? Like, I'm going to die, like actually die. Like, what I did to you is not the same thing.
Sure.
And like, I'm still keeping this grounded perspective of survival first. We'll settle everything else.
We'll talk later.
Yeah.
But that was the point, right? That
was the point. Yeah.
My grief is essentially like I'm dead inside. And that was the whole point of the first part of the movie is all the friends were like, is Sarah okay? Because she hasn't left her house in forever. She doesn't really do anything anymore. We're trying to get some life back into her.
Yeah.
But the thing was that Juno was allowing her to just emotionally suffer because she wasn't giving her this thing that she could.
See, I like that talking point in the movie too, because I'm not sure I 100% agree with what she should have done in that circumstance.
Sure, fair.
I do agree she should come clean to her at some point. But I just don't know, like, when would be the appropriate time, because
when would have been before? I mean, I get it.
When would have been before? Yes, would have been like before,
Take
obviously.
Your responsibility
when would have been to not let it happen in the first place. But like, we're here now.
Sure.
Okay, so we have to choose a path forward, and like Juno is the most like, she's the most how do I put it, like she is the most likely person to get into this kind of a trouble,
right?
Because she
adventurous and
she throws caution to the wind, and it's just kind of like, oh, whatever, I can take care of myself. I know what I'm doing, and she is right about that.
Well, she lives in the moment, and if that moment brings forth something that might be morally, I don't know, ambiguous at best, or divergent at worst, then it's like, well, we're here, so let's just live in the moment.
I'll just figure that moment out then too, and I'll just address it when the time comes.
We'll address the consequences when they pop up.
Right. And then it's like a really nasty one, and it's like, oh shoot, I'm not sure how to do that one, so I guess I'll just avoid it for a little while.
Right.
And that's her solution to it. But you see her like really tackling that situation, and then like it's almost like she bites off more than she can actually chew, and the movie starts to like.
Well, because it kind of it builds and builds and builds, and then finally it's like, well, we're in this situation.
The story is like, Juno, you're biting off way too much. Yep. This is what it looks like, and she's like, I'm getting frustrated with that, right?
The interesting thing about it, though, is that because Juno never faces it, the situation kind of takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
She never is the one that takes responsibility, so then the monster kind of rears its head from the darkness, and then it consumes her.
Right.
And that's embodied by Sarah. But it's an interesting theme because, like, well, how long do you let it go? Because you think that it's just going to exacerbate whatever situation it is that, you're going to make something worse. But in reality, it's like, you got to just kind of rip off the Band-Aid at some point.
Yeah,
because,
you gotta,
I mean, it's going to affect everybody else if not, or it's going to get you both killed. I mean, in a metaphorical sense. But in this movie, they made it more realistic. But
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, can't
See
really
how-
make a
so-
sequel off of that.
Right. But see how, like, it's so easy to flip back to the first movie and talk about some kind of insightful tidbit from that movie? Because, like, you don't get that here. Like, all of that stuff is just out the window.
Right.
I mean, like you said, like, the way it establishes the movie at the very beginning, you're like, okay, so this is just, like, horror movie schlock. Like,
it is. It's
from the very beginning, it's just a giant trope, and then it just is like digs its heels down and is like, we're gonna be as tropey as we can get throughout the rest of the film.
even the ending was just like,
oh my gosh.
I was like, okay, I see where this is going. Got it.
Okay, so we are gonna spoil the ending. We have to
We
talk
might
about
as
that
well.
ending.
Sure.
It's freaking hilarious.
I will say that the ending that I predicted, or that you predict, whatever, we both were predicting kind of both things that were happening all through that. But one of the characters gets out, and then they try to go with the whole, you never saw this coming. And it was like, oh, you just made it like 10 times worse. What are you trying to do with this? Because it feels, on a meta level, it feels like they're trying to, I don't know, set up for a franchise of this. Because they're working in tandem with some of the humans who are making sacrifices to them. It's like, no, the whole point of the first movie was that they were just part of the environment to help tell a story.
Right.
Now you're making it the central focus of this film.
Yeah.
You've completely lost what it was that made them good in the first place.
Yeah.
Because that was the point. They're just elements of this environment. Now it's like,
the
now
monsters...
they're like the monsters that we serve. It's like, okay.
Yeah, there's some conspiracy theorist character who's helping them. And
right.
But see, this is where it doesn't make sense, because he's the person who finds Sarah at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And like you pointed out, you're like, well, why didn't he just sacrifice Sarah to the creatures then? Why did he take her to the hospital? What's the point? What's the motivation there? Makes no sense.
Yeah, because he's driving the tow truck, and then she comes and like flails against his window or whatever.
And passes out.
The way that they end it is that the chick cop, whatever, I don't remember her name, whatever it is, she gets out because Sarah sacrifices herself so that the lady with the daughter can make it.
Yeah.
This lady runs out, and then this guy randomly shows up in the forest, hits her with a shovel, drags her back to the hole, and it's implied that he's like in league with these monsters or whatever, and no one's gonna make it out. Yeah. But that's the thing, is like in the beginning you're like, well, if Sarah came up and slammed against his window, that guy, they made sure you knew it was that guy. He's wearing the same hat through the whole movie.
Because they want to set up in the beginning, like, you need to know it's this character because he's going to show up later for a twist. But, like, this doesn't make sense.
At that point,
contradictory actions.
She faints at his window. He would have been like, oh, cool. And he just, like, picks her up and, like, walks her back to the hole.
Yeah. I mean, where did he think she came from? I
right.
mean, obviously.
He knew. And so it was like, well, why didn't he just sacrifice Sarah, and then none of this movie happens? And I understand that that's the reason that none of this movie would have happened, but it would have been a better movie if it didn't happen at all. But yeah, so the thing about the whole this set of films is that there's a standard that I adopted from another YouTuber that I watched, that if a film gets you to think about it more than after you've watched it, if it really helps you delve into themes and understand like what it's trying to embody, and if it embodies those well, that's a sign of a good film.
Yeah.
And I would tend to agree with that on average. I know there's other factors, but that I think is a good one.
That's a very good base.
Yeah, it's a great base, because when you're getting into subjective territory, and film really embodies that, is like how someone is going to accept it. If it really helps you understand certain themes or philosophies or something, and it helps you really consider them even after you're done watching, that's a sign that art has done its job.
Yeah.
And I think the first film does that very well. Second film completely misunderstands what gave it its existence in the first place, and just runs off with these tropey things of someone being like, well, I got a name here that everyone recognizes and a chance to make a movie. I'm just going to make it off of horror movies that I grew up on. I don't even know. It was so far removed from anything intelligent. I can't. I mean, I agree with I disagree, because those are both way too high on the scores there. This should have been like a 10 or 12%. Like it's so bad on so many levels, where it was good on the first film.
It's pretty much almost entirely irredeemable.
Yeah,
there's like maybe 1 or 2 actors that are okay, but most of them are kind of ruined. Oh yeah, see here's actually something I do want to point out too. I'm gonna get into a nuanced part in both movies because it's a very similar theatrical element that they use, but they're very different from each other. So in the first movie, that scene where Sarah pops out of the blood pool and she climbs onto a rock, a monster goes in there. And then she like freezes because she hears the monster. And the monsters can't see, they can only hear, right? So as long as you're quiet and you don't move, they won't notice you. So anyways, the monster comes up behind her and it's like snarling and like drooling and stuff. And then the drool like drips down and like falls on her face and it's like, ugh, gross, right? The thing that it works in that movie because it's not just like, ugh, gross horror thing. It's partly that, but the other part of it is it's showing that like Sarah's not grossed out by this. She's like keeping her cool under pressure.
Yeah.
And then she's able to overcome that challenge instead of being like, ew, oh my God. You know what I mean? Which is what she would have done when the movie started.
Right. Okay.
When it gets to the second movie, they try to do this thing again. And the way they do it is there's one of the girls from the first film who had died. She's like hanging from the ceiling or whatever, and there's a gap between them. And so there's these 2 characters. They're trying to get across the gorge, and they have to grab onto the dead body, swing across, and make it. This is what they have to do. So she's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't do that." And then she like kind of muzzles up some courage, and then she goes over and grabs her. And then like at some point, the corpse is like and like coughing up blood, and the blood is like falling on her face, and she's like, oh my gosh. And it's like, okay, this doesn't work. It doesn't work for one because she's like holding around her rib cage, so like the blood would just fall down her neck and then be behind her. It wouldn't be on her face at all. So like the perspective was all off. But the other reason is that like there's no character transformation. This character dies like literally like 5 seconds after this when she gets across the gorge. So there's no point to have this other than just be like, ew, gross horror stuff.
Well, there's no point to the whole scene in general because
it's the 2 characters die, so who cares?
Yeah, both characters are involved in the scene because the guy sacrifices himself, right? He thinks he's dying because he got bit on his artery or whatever.
Yeah,
and then he like drills into this creature's head. So he kills his.
So 2 creatures come out. One jumps on her and is like clawing her. The other one's attacking him, biting him, and he's like, and he drills it.
Which doesn't make any sense. It just sits there and lets him like it's on top of him, and he's just like, and it's like, why would this thing just sit there and let him kill it like that? It took forever for him to drill through the head. He could have like it would have been a fight, but whatever.
Just hold on.
Yeah, give me a minute. It's almost through. So he kills that one, kicks it off, and he's like, I'm gonna die anyway, so I'm gonna save my girlfriend or whatever. So this thing that's like clawing at her, he jumps on it, and they both fall into the dark or the abyss, right?
Yeah.
And so
one of the signature shots of this movie, constantly this overhead shot.
It's bad.
In the blackness.
It looks like an
80s
shot. It's one of those where you're like, clearly they're not really falling.
Yeah,
it looks really bad. I know. So he falls with this other creature, and then this girl who had implausibly had blood dripping on her face. So she's hanging on to like this mid portion of this dead chick, right?
Yeah, the torso.
The head is clearly here.
Yeah.
Right? But I guess in relation here. Gravity would not allow blood dripping from her to reach my face. That would never happen. But somehow it defies gravity, and it's like dripping all over her face. And she's like, And it's clear, like it's setting up the shot where you can clearly see where the heads are at. So it's like, okay, this wouldn't be happening, but they want this horror element to be happening. It would have been more interesting if she'd like grabbed onto her hands or something.
Okay.
And so she's hanging onto this corpse's like arms, and then that's what's causing it to like drip out, and then it's dripping on her. Because then it's more like just a rough sequence in general, because she's having to use this dead person's hands to survive, and then she's like still bleeding, even though she wouldn't be bleeding, but whatever.
Yeah, she wouldn't be bleeding.
It's like, why are we bleeding? It doesn't make any sense. But
conceptually, I agree with you. It's not a bad concept that they have to like swing across this dead body, because it's like, oh, that's really gross.
Yeah, but survival, you got to do things that you don't want to do,
right?
Which I get.
Yeah, it's a bit taboo, but like, all right, it's like, it's a thought you had. We could execute this well, but then they're just like, make it gross.
Yeah, like put the blood in there and makes her freak out. But then she makes it across because of this guy's sacrifice. and then just sits there and whines about it forever.
Yeah,
and
she's like screaming. She's like, ah, ah, and like screaming, and like they're attracted to sound.
Right, and
What
she
are you
knows
doing?
this.
Shut up.
And she's like, well, I guess I'll just draw another creature so I can just die, which is exactly what happens. This creature shows up behind her, and then she dies. It's like, well, what was the point of watching all this? There was like 10 minutes worth of screen time for nothing at all. Like okay,
you know
so
what
neither
she
one of
should've
them
done?
made it.
You know what she should have done? She should have taken out her hairpin and stabbed that thing to death.
So one of the things I liked about the first movie was that it does have one or two of these moments which I really hate. I hate them. And I'm going to get on a soapbox for a second. The whole me, woman, hear me roar thing gets really old really fast. And Descent, I thought was going to be a lot more of that. It has one or two moments that I was like, oh, all right, whatever.
I'm curious to hear what moments when you're done with this, but go ahead.
I'm trying to remember all of them because it's like,
Okay.
there were very few, thank God. And they don't play into it where it's like, well, now that she's said me, woman, hear me roar, she's not going to die. It's like,
I feel like
they gain some like courage or
Yeah.
whatever, and then it's still pretty realistic through the film. This one, the female cop like pulls this hairpin out that's like this totally impractical hairpin. It's like, who uses this? It looks like a giant, like this big of a staple. It was like, do people use this in their hair? Like, if you move wrong, you're just gonna impale your spine or something. So you're like, it's weird too, because it's this totally improbable shift that she does. So they're in there, Sarah's getting attacked, and she's like sitting behind it, just freaking out. And she does it the whole movie. She has like
freaking
no
out.
survival skills whatsoever. Like, this chick is dead.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it does this real weird jump shot where she gets this like calm look on her face.
Yeah, she's like, I got this.
I'm gonna live. And then she like goes in and like shoves it into this thing's throat, and then it's just like spurting all over Sarah. It's just like really dramatic.
Yeah, because that's the thing. She stabs him in the side. It's
and
not
it takes
like
him like 10 minutes. Just like
it should be shooting this way, and instead it's like shooting
right
at
Sarah's
her, and
mouth.
she's like, ow, ow. It's like, what?
It's so improbable. It was just so dramatic. The blood looked so fake.
Yeah, it's
And
like ketchup, watered down ketchup blood, because
it does look
it's
like
super well lit. That
Yeah.
was another good point. In the first film, we were watching some of that, and like the blood looks pretty good because
Well,
it's
it also
dark.
It hides all the effects in general, so it's a lot more terrifying because you don't know what you're fighting, and it hides any shortcomings that any of the special effects or visual effects department would have. And so it was really effective in that way. They were playing to their weaknesses or their strengths, I guess, however you want to interpret it. They lit this one so well that all the blood looks really fake. The effects look really fake. And
Creatures look fake.
Yeah, and then like this moment is just, again, there's no reason for it, because then so the symbolism of the first one is that she's in this vat of blood, and then she comes out and she like goes through a transformation.
Yeah.
So the rebirth theme within the hero's journey is always usually water. Usually, I think in like Dune, it's the worm blood, but the rebirth scene is like Luke in New Hope is when he delves underneath the water in the trash compactor and then pops up.
Yeah,
he's supposed to be this character that's developing into something that can handle becoming what he becomes later. And then this one, it's blood because it's a horror film, but she rebirths into something that can actually survive these caves.
Yeah.
In this one, they go into the water and there's no rebirth. It's like they just know that there should be a water scene, and so they just fall into this water for no reason. And then they're like, oh, what is this stuff? There's a bunch of stuff floating around. And you kind of think like maybe it's bones or, what
Rocks,
something horrific,
mud.
whatever. And then for no reason at all, at the perfect moment, she's like, what is this stuff? This thing comes over and takes a dump into the water. So it's the creature's toilet. And it's like, for one, would these creatures have a toilet like this? For two, this was just here to be gross for no reason. It didn't add to the story. It didn't do anything for the development. It was just kind of it's for them to be like, ew. And then they just move on. It's like, there was no reason for this scene at all. Like, no one goes through any rebirth except for her, like, stabbing this thing. But even so, she still
but that's
freaks out the rest of the movie.
It's so unearned.
It is.
That's the problem with it. They try to establish it in the scene before it, because before it, the sheriff character handcuffs himself to Sarah because Sarah's like, well, I'm not going to hang out with Juno. And then he's like, yes, you are, and I don't trust you. I think you tried to kill Juno, and you killed all your friends, even though I have nothing to back that up. That's what I think. And then they're crossing this gorge, and Sarah's like, well, we should go one at a time. And he's like, we're not doing that. So obviously she crosses first, and the rocks fall, and he's like, oh, no, like, help me, pull me up. And then Juno, and like Sarah's like, help me, Juno, and Juno's like, I don't want to, but I guess I'm going to do something. And so what you're thinking probably at this point, even now, I would imagine, having not seen the films, if you haven't seen them, you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, well, Juno goes and cuts his arm off, right?
Well, you'd assume first that the cop chick is going to go try and help Sarah. She would be the one like trying to hold on because she would be saving her partner.
Or
and
freaking
Sarah,
out. Yeah.
Or
one
she
of
would
the
be
two.
freaking out. And then Juno would be the one to go and chop off his hand in order to survive because she's got the survival skills to do so.
Right, and she would just be like, this is what we're doing.
But
Like,
no,
bam.
Juno's the one trying to hold Sarah up, and then they force the cop chick to go and chop off her partner's hand.
She tells the cop girl, like, chop his arm off, and she's like, oh, okay. I'm like, whoa, she wouldn't do that.
She would not do this. She would be trying to
There's
help him
no way
up.
she would do this. But then afterwards, she's like, oh, I'm traumatized. I just killed that guy, my friend, my boss. And then they go into the next room, and a little bit later, she's like, now I got this. I'm like, okay, this transformation makes zero sense at all.
Yeah,
like,
it didn't have the ascent or descent, I suppose, in order to justify her character development or her arc.
Yeah.
It just was kind of like, well, this looks like the scene that we had in the previous movie, so it's basically the same, right? And it's like, no. They don't know how to tell a story. This is just kind of something that just happens. It's just, oh, this is gory and gross, and that's why they have like this special the like gore effects. There's like spurting into Sarah's mouth, and like, and then
gross.
it's just a vat of poop, and it's like, what are we doing here? And then it's supposed to be like their bonding moment or whatever, and that's when she's like, I'm gonna sacrifice myself so you can save yourself and go to your daughter. It's like,
we bonded in the vat of poop.
Yeah, it just there's no the symbolism there just doesn't exist for one, but also it's zero effect in a positive way. Like it doesn't contribute to the story. It doesn't tell a story.
When your movie is so tropey for so long,
right,
that basically you've lost all your credibility. You can't make something like this reasonably work now. It's like it's just impossible. It's like there's no redeeming this now. You've like driven a stake through this project. Yeah, through the very beginning by the way that you set this up. And so now it's like the audience is lost. You've completely lost them.
Yep.
Your only hope now is to make fun of yourself. That's the only thing you can do at that point.
They didn't effectively do that.
Which they did not do that either. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And then like, the characters die in all the predictable ways that you expect. Terrible movie. Totally misunderstands the first one.
Highly recommend seeing the first one. Would not recommend even considering the second one.
Yeah, just don't bother.
Don't bother. Rotten Disparity in the first and the second. Well, do you have any closing thoughts? I think we should just end it there because I've had enough of this film for one day.
Yeah,
forever.
That's fair. I will just say this. One other final point in favor of the first one, because I'm talking now, we're ending on the note of like how it started off the film and how the Descent 2 starts off in such an awful way. Well, Descent 1 has this really good shot in the opening where Sarah wakes up in the hospital and she's told that her husband and her child have been killed in this accident because it's a car accident and she was hurt too, but she makes it and they don't. So when she's told that, she goes like, running out of the hospital wing and just down the hall.
That's right.
And then as she's running down the hall, the lights are going out behind her until like they all go out. And so she's like running away from this darkness that eventually just goes up and overtakes her. And that is like a really like good shot to just kind of encapsulate like a microcosm of the whole movie of what you're about to experience, of her like running away from this, and then it overtakes her, and then it leaves us with that question, what's she gonna do once it does overtake her? And then the film tries to provide an answer to that at the end.
Right.
So it's a nice way to use your visual storytelling to communicate what's going on internally with the character. And this is like where that second film just completely throws that out the window. It gives us this super cliched opening, sliding down the window. And
it has no visual symbolism at all, whereas the first one was very careful about what it set up and how it paid it off.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just a good, I think, thing to keep in mind about like how it is important to establish your credibility early on of what you're going to be doing.
Good point.
Because, and I mean, I guess to be fair, Descent 2 tells you exactly what kind of movie it's going to be from the very beginning.
Fair.
It's just not a good one.
Well, the thing about it is that from the beginning, they try and set it up to be an intelligent film. Like, yes, this is going to have some horror tropes in it, but it's also going to try and portray itself in a way that's very characteristic of something unique.
Yeah.
And it's going to be different. So, that's a good point. I appreciate that. Well, you've heard about one of Mitch's top 10, maybe 11th. Favorite movie.
Yeah, I gotta go look through those again.
Yeah, I mean, we should do an episode on our favorite films and kind of go through why. We'd have to like narrow down the point so it's not a 6-hour episode, but or maybe we'll just do one at a time or something.
Oh,
That
the audience would love 6 hours of us jabbering on, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm pushing 1 hour and 15 right now, and I'm
There's
wondering.
like breaks where we like get up and walk off camera, and it keeps going, and then like we sit back down and we're like still eating and stuff.
Brought our tea. We're gonna continue on number 3. I would hope we're that interesting, but I highly doubt it. I'm not gonna assume that. No, I'd like to structure the show to where people want to watch it, and that I don't think that's gonna contribute to that. All right, well, I'm gonna call it there. I'm not even sure how to quite end this episode.
Indulging me.
Thank you for watching. This has been The Descent on the HolmFront. Have a good night.